welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome to a very early start in Hong Kong, but a very early start I'm not going to complain about because let's not beat around the bush. This is the pagani ZONDA Fantasma Evo. Now, I've spent very little time around Zondas. I think I've seen a few roll up to car events, maybe I've seen some in dealerships, and I even attended a Pagani event back in the summer. When was that actually? But anyway, I've never sat in one, I've never been in one as it's moving. It's just a whole experience that I've always wanted to have and just haven't. But I think today that might change because unbelievably the owner of this car has invited me to come up here, check it out and film it for you guys. However, it's going to be a different video to any ones I've sort of shot before. It's going to be a bad rip-off of a oh my god, I can't speak. I told you it was an early start. I've only had one coffee, so come on, Sam. It's going to be a bad rip-off of a Petrolicious video because I have managed to convince the owner, who doesn't want to appear on camera, to at least speak on camera or speak off camera. I'm going to record his story and the very interesting story about this car while showing you around the car itself. Then towards the end, hopefully we're going to take this thing out on the road so I can get some shots of it moving and give you my sort of impressions from the passenger seat. So yes, sit down, sit back. I hope you enjoy hearing about this car because it is not just any old Zonda, it's a very, very interesting Zonda, but I'm going to have the most amazing morning ever.
My Pagani story started, interestingly enough, with the Zonda Cinque, and that's one of the 5 cars that were commissioned by SPS in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong dealer back in the day. The car I had was the orange one, which is the number 3 car, and that was my first taste of Pagani and getting to know the brand, and then absolutely fell in love with it. I suppose the one thing is, for me, it did not have a manual transmission. And to me, the Zonda, I think in its ultimate form, should have a manual transmission for the highest level of driving enjoyment. And so rather than do anything to butcher or change that particular car, being a limited edition, I decided to part ways with it and then secured the Zonda Fantasma, which I thought was a good starting point to potentially create what I thought would be the ultimate road-going Zonda. As you know, Pagani allows a lot of bespoke type of projects, especially if you're trying to commission something that's a one-off. There are probably, let's say, generally 2 directions. One is to do something that's highly personalized, something that completely reflects your own taste or your own vision. And I decided to take a different approach, which is to try to study and understand the brand, the principles that built the brand, and the way that Horatio saw his vision of Pagani from the early days, and try to build a car that's built on those principles. And I would say one of the most important principles of Pagani is lightweight, and the reason why to date there's no hybrid system yet is because there is no system that Pagani is satisfied with from a weight standpoint. So when I thought about my quest to build the ultimate road-going Zonda with the vision of Pagani, it would be, is there ways to reduce weight? Is there ways that we can improve the performance overall from the aero standpoint or from the handling standpoint? And no one is going to resist a little bit more power if we can achieve that goal. I remember that conversation quite vividly. It was actually in Venice in 2016, outside Cipriani. So we just finished lunch, and I said, I have this idea, and the idea is Pagani being a pioneer of carbon fiber technology. They had the carbon tub, obviously, from the Zonda from the very early days. That progressed to carbo-titanium material in the Cinque and for some other subsequent one-off models. But then I had this idea that, well, if we look at the latest generation of carbon fiber technology that found in the Wire Roadster and the Wire VC, there's a new progression, and the material is called carbo-titanium plus carbo-triax HP52. I hope I got that right, the jargon. But in layman terms, it's an even lighter material and even stronger. So that to me was the key ingredient to create the Evo of the Fantasma, is to answer that question of can we make the car lighter and even more rigid. And so the challenge I gave to Horatio was, can you consider making a Zonda tub using this material found in the latest generation of cars? And he said he'll go back and think about it, study it, research it. And he came back with some good news. And he says, yes, it could be done. So to my understanding, Zonda Fantasma Evo is the first Zonda in the world to have this material using for the construction of the tub. Yeah, well, I think the first thing you'll notice about the Fantasma Evo, if you've seen the Fantasma, is that it actually looks somewhat similar. It's not completely different. And that's intentional in that approach, because the Fantasma has a story and is part of the history of the brand, I think, given that it started life as a Zonda F. The car came to Hong Kong, was involved in an accident, was rebuilt into the Fantasma, and Fantasma means a ghost in Italian, so it's kind of like reborn. So to me, it was trying to keep that element of the history of the car, but evolve it with some further components, like we have the vented bonnet in the front, and this is to assist cooling for driving. That's one of the main functional reasons to have it. I mean, it looks pretty cool, but it's more for a functional reason. And of course, the slightly larger rear wing compared to the previous car for a bit more better aero balance. But the aesthetics is probably somewhat similar to some of the other 760s you've seen, like the 760 LH, for example. So cosmetically, we try to retain most of the character of the original Fantasma. The interior had a big change, and that's because the original scheme for me was a bit too, did not reflect the character of the car particularly well, because it was a bit sort of cream and red leather, which is a bit classic looking. And we were trying to go for a bit more of an aggressive character overall for the car, given that it's very much, more performance orientated. One thing that, if you're serious about driving, there is no replacement for a lightweight car. You have cars which are very good nowadays with technology to compensate for weight, but let's say braking, inertia, there's nothing you can do. You can have stickier tires, you can have better brakes, but at the end of the day, the weight of the car and the inertia of it, there's only so much you can do to compensate for that. And so for a car like this, being very lightweight, it has a very special feeling. It's very agile. The braking performance is incredible. And one important ingredient that we changed from Fantasma to Evo is the reversion to the manual transmission. And that, again, is very much part of the whole driving enjoyment, because you have the sound, the AMG M120 engine, which is legendary in the sound, and the tuning that they've done now with the exhaust manifolds and with the mufflers has a very, very unique character to it. And the sound is actually very different to, let's say, a Zonda F and even a Zonda S. Those are incredibly sounding cars themselves, but it's a different type of sound for this car. So I would say it's not the fastest car out there. There are hypercars today which maybe have better performance, but for me, in terms of the overall connection and emotional enjoyment, and let's just call it driving pleasure, and if I were to steal the line from Evo magazine, the thrill of driving, this is it. I've done quite a few Pagani projects actually. This is I started with the Fantasma Evo. Then I also did the project with the Zonda S, which was completely different approach. They were launching the new program called the Rinascimento, which is the restoration service in a similar manner to Ferrari Classic A, which is to take cars which have been modified or converted and restore them back to completely original condition. So I acquired a Zonda S, an early car, and a car which had maybe a bit of a tough life, but it was one of the earliest examples, being chassis number 12. And the idea was to make it absolutely 100% the same as the day it left the factory. And so that's a project that we finished off last year, and it was the first car that was produced with the Rinascimento service. So that car is completely different to the Fantasma in terms of the philosophy. is to respect the early cars and the early developments and the early production methods. Everything even down to the leather. I think the factory managed to find the same artisan who trimmed that car to retrim the car in its original configuration. So anyway, that's a story for another day. But yeah, I mean, there is something in the pipeline, and I would say watch this space. You know, it's the 20th anniversary of the Zonda. I think we need to commemorate that.
As you can now see, I have stepped inside a Zonda for the very first time. This is absolutely mad. We've been out getting some sort of external shots of the car, got some GoPros on, but I just thought I had to bring you this experience because, as I say, I'm in a childhood dream being achieved just sitting in one of these things, let alone going for a ride. So big thanks to the owner. I'm going to hold on tight and try and translate some of my emotions as I have this experience, because yes, it's definitely what you call a unique one. The first thing I have to say is sitting in this car is as exciting as looking at it. The theatre is not to miss. I mean, the view in the windmills is nuts. And the noise is as good inside as it is outside. Definitely not picked the sort of most perfect day to drive a car with this kind of power, but it really doesn't matter. It's actually adding a bit of the drama, I suppose. It's rigid as you would hope it would be. It's feeling lightweight, but it's special immediately. It's just that noise. It's all about that soundtrack. There's little backfires going on, but it does make sense as a manual, this car. I mean, what other hypercars are there in the world these days that you can get with a clutch pedal? I mean, drove the 918, I said I might have peaked too soon with this whole drive the world thing, but we're in Hong Kong, my, what, 5th country, and I'm now in the passenger seat, one of the most unique Zondas ever created. I think, yeah, now I should just give up, I should go home, shouldn't I? Where am I going to go from here? Oh God.